Hey everyone, Decius here with another video. Today I'm going to be doing a book review on the final chapter of the Mistborn installment series, the third book called The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. So, kind of getting right into it, the big premise, I'm definitely going to get into a lot of spoilers in this video, so if you haven't read any of the series or, you're starting the third book or whatever your circumstance may be, if you haven't read this book, I would not suggest watching this video. That's just my warning, so please click off so you don't get spoiled if you do end up reading or listening to this series in the future. So, alright, that is all said and done. The big premise of The Hero of Ages is this energy being, this universal threat named Ruin, is released from the Well of Ascension following the ending of the Well of Ascension book, the second book. So Vin gave up and sacrificed the power of preservation that she gained in the Well of Ascension to save Elend's life, to spare him, and she thought that this was the right thing to do because that was what the Lord Ruler didn't do. He decided to keep the power and to use it to create the world and how he wanted to create it, and became a little bit too arrogant. And so Vin thought that was the right thing to do, and it turned out the Lord Ruler may have been more right about things and less evil than we may have thought. I mean, he's still a pretty evil dude. He's very authoritative. He has a very strict and cruel society, but you got to give the man credit. He did rule it for about 1,000 years with his Feruchemy and Allomancy capabilities. He ran a tight ship. We can give the Lord Ruler some credit for that. So Vin kind of realized that she made an oopsie and let this universal threat out of its purgatory, its captivity within the Well of Ascension. And so now the Earth, or whatever this planet is called, is starting to become more environmentally unstable. The volcanoes are erupting even stronger. There's ash, literally blizzards of ash now consistently. The mist is staying out during the day and it's covering even more of the clouds, and things are just not looking good for the world. The ash is literally starting to bury cities, and that's just not very helpful when it comes to having a society, having a civilization, and especially ruling that civilization, which is the case for Elend and Vin in this third installment. Elend is the emperor of this first empire, is what Elend wants to call it. So he is in a very he's a very responsible individual for the predicament he's in. He's responsible for everything that's happening, and he wants to ensure that people are prepared for what's to come. And with that, we're kind of thrust into this battle sequence in a city in the southwest area of the world, and they are trying to secure cities that have the bunkers that the Lord Ruler installed in each of these cities to kind of retain resources and to survive a doomsday predicament, which is exactly what's happening right now. So it kind of shows that the Lord Ruler had a lot of foresight, and he had 1,000 years to prepare for something very bad to happen, which was the inevitable release of Ruin. And with that, it's very interesting to read this just as a front. Just going into this story, that shit's going down. It's the final chapter of the series. How is it going to end? And how are these characters going to survive? And in this review, I want to talk about these plot elements and, kind of a gist of what happened, while also trying to retain my own thoughts and opinions of these things. If I liked it, if I didn't like it. I finished this book about a month ago at this point. I think it's been a while. I've been reading some other stuff since then. And so with that, I think I have a nice fresh perspective while reading other people's books to kind of jump back into what I thought about The Hero of Ages and the Mistborn story in and of itself, all three books. What did I think of it? And yeah, starting from there, I think a standout character in this book is Tensoon, the Khandra that was kind of had a spotlight in the second book, kind of building a friendship with Vin while he was also working for Zane and Straff Venture. And so there's a very interesting predicament that Tensoon finds himself in at the beginning of the story, where he's literally a shapeless blob in a prison cell, and he's in the Kandra civilization. So one thing I really liked about Tensoon's chapters is we learn so much about the culture of the Kandras and all of their little nuances and certain traditions and rituals they have. There's all these proper nouns with all of these different, vocabulary terms and just all these different things that they do and how they describe themselves and how they describe life. And I really enjoyed kind of being a fly in the wall, looking in on this 1,000-year culture that Tensoon is a part of. He's a third generation member, which means he was created 300 years after the Lord Ruler's ascension to throne. And with that, they look at their civilization and the people, the Kandra of the civilization, through their generations. So the first generations were created specifically by the Lord Ruler, and every generation after that was created by the first generation, using the blessings that were given to the first generation from the Lord Ruler. And moving on from that, I don't want to expand too far into it, but I really liked the Kandra chapters, and I really liked just seeing how they judge each other in certain crimes and how strict they are and how they follow such a serious code, and that there's the conflict between the first generation, the second generation, which is kind of the front face of the Kandra themselves. They speak for the first generation, but you see that later on there's a conflict between the first and second. The second really want the power, and the first are kind of hidden away from the rest of the Kandra. And I thought that was pretty cool. I really liked all the attention to the detail in building that up. And I think moving on from that, kind of talking about the Inquisitors, the Kolas, the Kandra, all as a collection of the same magical allomantic, but it's not allomantic power. I should have wrote it down in my outline what that power is called. I don't know it off the top of my head, but there is a third different type of kind of metal power, which is the transfer of life to someone else's life using nails, which we kind of recognize in the Inquisitors right from the get-go in the first book, that they had these nails drilled into their eyes and the nails drilled into their body, but we never really understood why that was the case or what kind of power they possessed to give the Inquisitors those abilities. And this book really kind of cements that is a completely separate power from Furukami or allomancy, and it's about stealing energy and power from someone else who may have possessed Furukami or allomancy. So it's the transfer of those powers to someone else through the killing of the original person that had the power and transferring it through a nail into the being that will possess that power. So they kind of had a pretty gruesome scene with Marsh, where they had a body on top of him, a Furukamist, I believe, and they stabbed a nail through the Furukamist's heart and then into Marsh, which kind of is like a blood ritual sacrifice, which gave him more Furuchemical powers. And, that's just a pretty badass world-building, magical system in and of itself. It's like necromancy. And I thought that was super interesting. And just the fact that all of these beings that were possessed by the nail are being controlled by Ruin, which is the supernatural worldwide energy consciousness that has the capability to control certain things. Like he or she or it is the being that is making the world kind of fall apart and become more unstable. And it also shows that in the first and second book, Ruin in the background was kind of orchestrating all of these events to lead up to being released from the Well of Ascension by Vin, who was one of the perfect candidates for Ruin to ultimately manipulate into doing that and creating the narrative that there is a Hero of Ages in the first place, which is mostly a fabrication just to get someone to get to the Well of Ascension, to grab the power for the sake of it, but to believe that that power is too strong to possess, to relinquish the power, which lets Ruin out. I'm pretty sure that's the kind of the gist of it. And some of the other characters that I really enjoyed, I'm going to get into most of the characters, definitely not all of them, because I think there's a pretty good array of cast throughout this book, and there weren't any characters where I like really disliked. I thought most of them were pretty interesting for what they were, some more than others definitely, but I think Sazed had probably the best character arc through this story, sheerly by the progression that he kind of experienced. And I do have like some nitpicks, I suppose, but I did enjoy the sentiment of his character arc. So in this one, Sazed, he, after the death of Tindwyl, he's very, very much struggling just with his own faith, with the fact that he is one of the last keepers of the Terracemen, and he doesn't really feel too immersed in the world anymore. He's definitely he's fallen to a very kind of nihilistic, like a doomed nihilistic kind of perspective. Not nihilism for the sake of, nothing really matters, so, why not give it a go? Why not, let's see what's going. But the nihilism to the broader extent of nothing matters, like, I don't want to do this anymore. Just, he kind of really fell into a depression in this book. And I think for about 75% of the book, he's kind of in that headspace. And so going through his chapters, it sucks because we recognize Sazed as this kind of positive, wise person throughout the first two books, and someone who always wants to take care of the people around him and, really try to help and facilitate a revolution to overtake these hardships and everything. And seeing Sazed in this predicament, being very down on himself and feeling bad about the fact that he feels down as well, and not really seeing outside of himself really was, it was difficult to read those chapters, but I think it was all the more, powerful by the end of the book when he kind of comes out of it and he kind of realizes how, like, his religions, it all does have a purpose in some way. Maybe not in the way he thought it did, but in a new way that he can choose to believe in or choose to kind of look at the lens of life through. And just the ending of this whole book, especially, Sazed was the glue that held all of it together really by the end, I think was really awesome. And I thought it was just a very, very good close to the character of Sazed. And I was very satisfied with his ending. And I think that the chapter where he kind of turned around happened really abruptly. I don't think there was a lot of build up to it, in my kind of opinion. But I feel like that's kind of how life works at the same time. Things don't always naturally slowly build to a way that makes intuitive sense. Sometimes it's just an epiphany that happens and you're like, oh, I was looking at it in a wrong way, like from what I actually resonate with. And I think, it's realistic in that sense where he can kind of just wake up right away to like, oh, yep, I can do this, and I think that's cool. And moving on to the flagship characters of the book, Elend and Vin, I think they were, honestly, Elend and Vin are great kind of protagonist characters, but I didn't find them as compelling as other characters in this series, like especially like Kelsier, Sazed, Tensoon, even Tindwyl, and even some other minor characters like Spook and stuff. I kind of enjoyed their character arcs and their personalities more than I really resonated or enjoyed Vin and Ellen's POV. And that's just my hot take, but I think they were, good protagonists for what they were. They have complex character development, and their romantic relationship with each other, and the fact that Ellen becomes a Mistborn. And then there's that whole dynamic between their power levels. Like, yeah, they are definitely mega powerful and just kind of carrying everyone around them in just the sheer fact that they're so powerful. But just kind of as a retrospective looking back throughout the whole story, Elend and Vin just didn't really stand out to me as just, these are my protagonists, these are my people. Thinking back on the story after finishing it over a month ago, I look at Sazed as kind of like a flagship character. And Kelsier, to the extent that he was kind of a catalyst in the first book, but not even really Kelsier, because he was only in the first one. But definitely Sazed and Tensoon. And I like to think about like Breeze and Ham and kind of their dynamic. And yeah, they kind of stood out to me more. And I think that isn't a bad thing. I think that's just my perspective. I still really enjoyed reading their perspectives because they had very interesting developments, and I always enjoyed reading about Elend and Vin and seeing how Vin is very cunning and she's such a powerful character physically and mentally as well, and just how much she overcame throughout the story. And I think that is very compelling for just as a protagonist to kind of be the glue that holds the story together. But I don't necessarily, for me, think that made her my favorite character as well as Elend. And I think moving on to Spook, I think his storyline was excellent for the fact that one of the big things that stuck out to me the most was his perspective of things. Since his uncle died, Clubs, he died in the second book, and he was kind of feeling guilt because he felt that he was somewhat responsible for that by leaving Luthadel during the war before the Colossus attacked. And he began to flare tin continuously. And it was kind of similar to how I would view like drug abuse or just an addiction. And I think if you look at Mistborn series through the lens of addiction, and especially when using metals and becoming reliant on metals to see things in a certain way and then having somewhat of like withdrawal symptoms without it, I think there's a direct parallel with, drug abuse and addiction. And I'm not sure if that's what Brandon Sanderson wanted to convey in the story, but I think it's definitely a valid one to see through. And we see that Spook definitely abused Tin to the point where he became exponentially sensitive to everything. His sight, his touch, his hearing, his taste, everything, all of those senses heightened, who knows by how much. But he has to wear a blindfold around his eyes, and even with the blindfold on, his eyes can still see through the little openings of fabric, so he can still see pretty much perfectly still. And nighttime for him is described as blinding daylight. So it's just kind of a very interesting perspective. And he goes through this whole storyline of becoming somewhat of a savior himself, similar to Kelsier in the first book of the city of Ur-2, which is the city of the Ventures, the venture capital. Wait, venture capital. That's kind of funny. And there's canals throughout the city, which are all drained out, and there's marketplaces being held because this city is now being ran by the Ska, and it shows that even with the Ska in power, they become just as authoritative, but on the other end of things, because now they're trying to become they're trying to take over the noblemen and kill noblemen, and any signature of noblemen throughout the city is burned. Anyone with noble blood is burned and like literally burned alive in houses. And so it just shows the other end of things is just as worse as if the Lord Ruler was still in charge. And I think that's kind of a universal perspective. Power on both ends, no matter what, to the extreme on either side is just as bad, and that a middle path has to be found. And so I thought that was a good commentary on those kind of societal things, especially for, a younger person who may be reading this book who, I think it's a good kind of learning lesson to see how power operates, especially politically on both ends, and how it can be just as corrosive on either side. And so Spook's storyline was definitely pretty interesting. Definitely not my top storyline, but giving Spook some headlights in this story was pretty sick. I gotta admit there. And kind of I want to talk about the ending because I'm sure I missed a lot, especially with Phaedrex City and Yeoman, and kind of him being an obligator, still having roots to the Lord Ruler, and being a political ruler over the city and trying to act like nothing happened. And I thought that was a pretty interesting kind of take of the roots of an oppressive entity trying to still retain power, similar to Star Wars in what we see in like The Mandalorian, where there's still pockets of the Empire that exist even though the overarching power that is officially in power is like the Republic at the time. So it just shows that people are still loyal to even an oppressive force because it at least had some sort of structure. And even for the Ska, being kind of cultivated in a sense or conditioned for 1,000 years to act under a specific regime, and then feeling the absence of that regime, getting a sense of some sort of stability that it's at least something you knew and it's at least something that you expected, I think was a pretty interesting, and at least for me, like, it very much personally kind of connected with me. I think just in my own life, just having just a job that, and I think for many people can relate, just having a job that pays the bills, it is, what to expect by going to the job. Maybe it's not something you enjoy, or it's something you even dread in some way, but you at least know that it leads to some form of stability. And having that rather than not having a job or the uncertainty of things can lead someone to stay in a predicament that may not serve their best intentions. So I think kind of that theme throughout the story was very relevant in my personal life. And I think moving on to the end, where there's this, Vin literally transcends after killing like 14 Inquisitors, she ascends into becoming an aspect of like preservation, of becoming the universal consciousness on the other end of ruin, and them having like just kind of discussions, not really even discussions, but just kind of conflicting with each other in this universal, like, they're looking around the world and seeing everyone operate. It's like, just reading those chapters was really interesting because it's not a third person I'm following this character around. It's like I'm following this universal energy around and seeing all of the environments, and kind of the visualization of that was super sick. And then there's this whole battle at the end with hundreds of thousands of Colossus, and they're at the Khandra cave, and Elend is fighting back, and he is literally fighting for his goddamn life. And he has his badass sword, he's flying around killing thousands of them, and all these characters are all out war. It's an insane cinematic ending. And unfortunately, Elend does succumb to the wounds. He fucking dies because there's too many to actually effectively kill. So Elend's dead. And then there's like this, it's like the world is gonna end, like, because then Vin is trying to like save the world by burning away the ash in the clouds by putting it closer to the sun. And then the sun is like beaming through and it's not red anymore, but she fucked up and the earth is too close now. And that's exactly what the Lord Ruler did, because he had too much hubris and wanted to make the world in a certain way and fix things when he really made them even worse. And then Sazed comes along outside real quick in the battle. He sees Vin and Elend are dead. They're just laying there dead, like Vin's body materialized back, and then they're dead. And I might be getting the scene chronologically, like, not completely in order, but just my own recollection of it, talking back on this, because it was a very pivotal point in the story that stuck with me. And then, Sazed touches both their bodies, and then the light of the sun is like burning him, and then but he like vaporizes into becoming, and oh yeah, there's Ruin's body as well, like this red-haired dude or something. So maybe there'll be more of that in other Mistborn books, because I know there's a whole nother series. We'll see on that one. But yeah, Sazed literally becomes the universal entity, and he fixes everything. Because he has all of the knowledge of all of the keepers and all these generations of Terrace knowledge about religions and art and environment, biology, physics, you name it. And he completely redesigns the planet to fit under all of these conditions and to create flowers again and to create wildlife. And by the end of the book, it's all like a perfect paradise. And like, I think the epilogue, it's about Spook, and he's like all healed and everything because he was burned alive for saving people. And then he kind of goes out in the cave, and it's just like a nice, beautiful world, and it's such a happy ending. And I think after all of the horror throughout the whole series and all of the shit that these characters had to go through, I mean, it sucks that Vin and Ellen are dead, but you know that they died for like a completely good cause that completely saved the planet. And I just think that the story ended in such a wholesome and just fulfilling way that I can't help but be satisfied with the entire series and all of the characters, because I just know that it ended in such a beautiful way. And I think that Mistborn trilogy, you know, I think I read it at a good time in my life where I'm trying to go out of my comfort zone. I'm trying to challenge myself and push myself to, you know, do things that maybe I don't want to do, that may not be the easiest thing to do. And also just to still be, you know, fulfilled just by knowing that life is life. Life is life, and we can do what we want, and that we can have fun no matter what, and we can always choose to find meaning in things if we want to. So anyways, that is my review for the third The Hero of Ages Mistborn book, written by Brandon Sanderson. I am currently reading the Annihilation or the Southern Reach series by Jeff Vandermeer. So I'm going to be doing a review on the Annihilation book. I might post that the same day. I might make 2 videos tonight. Who knows if I'm feeling up to it. But anyways, did you enjoy the Mistborn series? If you did, or if you didn't, I'd like to hear either way. But anyways, what was your favorite Mistborn book in the trilogy? I think The Well of Ascension was my favorite one, just for the more grounded nature of it. I enjoyed the slow pacing. And I think my least favorite was the first one. And the middle of the road, I think, was The Hero of Ages, simply because, you know, it had to tie things up. But I think the ending was beautiful. And that is going to be the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel for more book reviews. Take care, everyone.